We're going to bring in now Jeff Snook, who has done a fantastic job covering this mess surrounding the Big Ten. You just heard me talking about Nebraska's parents potentially filing a lawsuit to try and allow the Big Ten football season to happen. We're going to get into a bunch of the other details now, and I'm excited to welcome him in. And Jeff, as a background, I believe you have written 14 different books. You are a long time plugged in with Ohio State. For people who may not be familiar with you, kind of give them your background, and you can plug some of the books and everything else to give them an idea of what you've accomplished in your career so far.
Well, yeah, thank you, Clay. Yes, I'm not on Twitter. I'm somewhat old school, and I just never joined it, probably never will. I'm not real fond of the 140 characters. Now I believe it's 280, isn't it? So
that's right.
To me, I'm more, the old school journalist that believed in great depth of a story as opposed to the USA Today approach. But anyway, I want to clear something up. I am not an Ohio State beat writer. I don't cover the program on a daily basis or the Big Ten on a daily basis. I went to school there back in the late 70s and early 80s. And then I went to Florida and worked in the newspaper business for a long time as a beat writer for college football. So I have experience as a college football beat writer. I basically left the newspaper business years ago and have been writing books full time. And I live in Florida full time. So that's, I'm not a beat writer up here in Ohio. I have a summer home up here that I'm at now that I come to 3 or 4 months a year just to get out of the heat and right now get out of the COVID because I live in Palm Beach County and they've had a lot of positive tests there. And, I've had asthma for years, so I want to get out of there and not get it and be up here during the good weather. So I just want to clear that up. But I'm not a beat writer like other guys that work this beat full time. But yeah, I have written I think 14 books. I just finished my first non-sports book, which comes out next month, and I'm beginning another non-sports book on my dad's World War II experiences in the Pacific. That I was supposed to travel through the South Pacific here in the next 2 months, but it looks like that's going to be canceled. So anyway, but I do have experience with the Big Ten going back to the 70s. I know how they operate. They've always operated the same way in total darkness, no transparency. It hasn't gotten any better. But, I refer back to the biggest decision they've made in their 125-year history prior to this was sending Ohio State to the Rose Bowl over Michigan in 1973. If you're familiar with that, it's very controversial. They never, ever revealed a vote. To this day, people don't know what that vote was. And Bo Schembechler went to his grave some 33 years later, still bitter as ever over that decision. And until the past 2 weeks, that's about the worst thing I've ever seen the Big Ten do. But, boy, how they've handled this. I mean, it is just one large mess, and it doesn't appear to be getting any better by the day. So
yeah, so I am fired up about this, and some people are like, oh, my God, I never would have believed that Clay Travis would end up the biggest advocate for Big Ten football anywhere on the planet. But for Big Ten fans, for players, for the parents of players, for coaches, I just feel like they have been fundamentally led astray, and frankly, I feel like they've been lied to a certain extent. So I want to unpack some of this with you, and let's start here. They keep releasing new statements about whether there was a vote, what exactly went on with the presidents and the chancellors. I'm fired up about this to start with because 13 of the 14 Big Ten schools are state institutions. The idea that there shouldn't have to be a public accounting for each president and chancellor, where whether you agree with them or not, I want to know how Purdue voted. I want to know how Ohio State voted. I want to know how Michigan voted. And I want all of those state institution, taxpayer-funded universities to actually have to have their presidents and chancellors stand up and allow themselves to be accounted for. You, I think, are probably fired up about this too. Why is there no public recitation of what the votes were? Or if there even was a vote?
This is how they've always operated, and it's not any different now. They got a commissioner on the job from the Minnesota Vikings that has no background in the Big Ten. To my knowledge, he's not in Chicago yet. He's still working out of Minneapolis. So these parents that are going to Chicago today on Friday
to protest.
I don't think they have anybody to meet with. So whether they're going to stand in front of the offices and attract some media or not, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't even know if they know that he's not in Chicago, unless he's flying in just for PR purposes to be seen there. But no, this is just how they've conducted business over the years. And, you're exactly right. 13 out of the 14, with the exception of Northwestern, are public schools, receive public money. But first of all, let me start with this premise. Do you believe actually there was a vote?
I don't know what to believe at this point because no, I don't. Let me say that. I don't believe there was a vote because the University of Minnesota president, I think, came out and said they never officially voted. And unless that person is lying, I don't think there was a vote.
I 100% believe they did not vote. People have told me they did not vote. Sandy Barber referred to it. The president of Minnesota referred to it. Last night, I see the chancellor of Nebraska tweeted they did vote. But there was no official vote. Well, I think what they did is he led the discussion, first of all. Kevin Warren guided this discussion among Big Ten presidents. And you got to realize, going into that meeting, you got 4 or 5 presidents on one side that wanted to play. You got 4 or 5 presidents on the other side that did not want to play, definitely. You got a lot of presidents in the middle that were on the fence. They were busy this summer tending to university business, not really gauging athletic programs related to the COVID. They didn't have time for it. They were relying on their athletic directors to report to them on a daily basis about the COVID numbers and what was happening in their football facilities and their bubble there. And all those reports have come back very, very positive, and I mean positive in a negative test way. And, they continue to tell you, coaches and athletic directors, how those players are safer there than they are released to the general public or to the campuses. So what they're doing directly conflicts anything they claim in the name of player safety. So, that being said, sure, if there was a vote, the vote should be revealed. It should be revealed the number, which presidents voted on one side, which presidents voted on the other. But the reason it won't be revealed is because it didn't happen. He guided this discussion, a general discussion. It was a back and forth, I was told. A lot of presidents asked questions, deep questions. Some presidents pushed this back, the schedule back to September 26th and kick it off then, or the latest October 3rd, that Saturday. He resisted and guided the whole conversation toward beginning in the spring, which brings up a whole other set of problems, total hypocrisy, how we're going to be safer in the spring and not even the subject of playing 2 seasons in a 10 or 11 month stretch. I mean, this you can't make this up. It's just disgraceful how it's been handled. And he released a letter yesterday that didn't make sense at all. I don't know if you read it or not.
Yeah, it's nonsensical.
I mean, this guy, I think they realize, Clay, they've made a bad hire, and they don't know what to do with it because it's so soon. This is the first decision. That when he came in, the first thing he did was initiate a voter registration drive for his 10,000 student athletes. And some of those courses he wanted in there and has instituted were things such as voter suppression and so forth. And I always question, is that the role of a conference commissioner, a conference athletic commissioner, to do that? But he's just botched this completely, and he's operating in total darkness. If you watched his interview with the Big Ten Network on the day that they announced the postpone. I call it a cancellation. They call it a postponement. But how do you postpone fall sports to the spring of 2021 and call it a postponement? It's a cancellation. And if you watch that press conference, I mean, it was laughable how he avoided questions. And I don't even know what he said. Nothing was specific. But it's like they don't care about this public, this alumni, the fans of the Big Ten that have built this in a billion-dollar industry through their ticket, gate receipts, donations, the TV ratings. I mean, TV ratings and contracts they've made these people rich, and they all have 7-figure salaries, and yet they act like they don't owe the public any explanation on the decisions they make, including the biggest decision they've ever made. There's so many ramifications to this and long-term effects of this. You're going to see non-revenue sports cut across the board. You could go on and on. Student athletes without a game to play after preparing for it, and I'm not just talking about football. Men's and women's non-revenue sports. The trickle down effect of this will be huge. So unlike most people up here in Ohio right now, I'm sitting here rooting for the ACC, Big 12, and SEC to follow through and make this work, because that'll further illustrate just what a dumb decision this was. And, even if it turns out to be the correct one in the long run, if these other conferences have to shut it down, it was way too premature. And the way they've handled it, they couldn't have handled it any worse.
We're talking to Jeff Snook, and you said so much that I agree with, and I want to unpack a little bit more. But I want to start with what you said about Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten, potentially being over his head. And you said something I think that's really interesting, which is 4 or 5 schools want to play, 4 or 5 don't, and then there's 4 or 5, 3 or 4, whatever it is, right there in the middle that are waiting to make determinations about what to do. Which schools do you think wanted to play based on the people that you have talked with?
I definitely believe Ohio State at the top. Iowa, Nebraska, and Penn State wanted to play. And then the other schools, you have different factions that wanted to play and didn't. So you definitely got Jim Harbaugh and Ward Manuel, the athletic director of Michigan, wanted to play. However, their president is, you may know, a medical doctor and a scientist.
Yes.
And he's aligned with that governor up there by the name of Gretchen Whitmer, who doesn't want any high school or college football played in her state. So he voted. He would, and I remiss. There was no vote. He did not want to. He did not want to play.
Yeah.
And then you got Wisconsin. Barry Alvarez, the longtime athletic director, he coached that program for 25 years. He definitely wanted to play, and I don't think he could convince his president to go along with that. So right there is 6 that, you have different factions. Rutgers and Maryland were a definite no, which brings up a whole other, issue of them ever being invited to this conference. Jim Delaney's biggest mistake, in my opinion, was reaching out and putting them in this conference only to extend his Big Ten network reach to the East Coast, and it was a dollar grab, but they don't fit in this conference at all. I mean, they don't make a commitment to improving their athletics like they should, and they stick out like a sore thumb. But anyway, and all I need to point to is the Rutgers players going to a party on July 29th, and then 28 of them test positive within the next week, and that scared the presidents as well as the issue of myocarditis that the Indiana offensive lineman had. So. And the rest of them were on the fence of what to do, and they were still trying to determine which science to listen to, which data to listen to, and there's so many conflicting things right there. So, they had some medical people telling them that just the opposite of what the medical people are telling the ACC, Big 12, and SEC commissioners. And now, I'm sure you noticed in the last 48 hours, the heart specialist at the University of Michigan has come out and said the Big Ten used flawed data, and they weren't paying attention to the correct data. And it's just hard to believe any of this. The inconsistencies are just glaring, and it just doesn't get any better by the day. They just don't improve their situation with any transparency at all.
Amen. All right, so it seems clear that the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, did not want to play this fall. And certainly that he helped to lead the Big Ten chancellors and presidents to that determination that they shouldn't play for the fall. Why does he not want to play when, in particular, his own son, who theoretically he's going to care about more than anything, certainly in the world of athletics, is going to be playing at Mississippi State? So if it's so dangerous in his mind that no athletes in the Big Ten can play for the entire fall, he can't even persuade his own son to follow that recommendation. Why do you think he was so convinced that the idea of playing college football this fall was a non-starter?
Well, that's the $1 million question, but I haven't seen him in front of a microphone yet. I mean, have you?
No.
He's avoiding the media back in Minneapolis, and now the people that cover the Big Ten are going to realize what they have to deal with this guy as far as a lack of transparency. There's going to be future issues if they keep him employed that they're going to have to deal with him on. And it's obvious that he's not a media-friendly guy, not a PR guy. He's operating in darkness. But who knows what his motivation was? I mean, people have speculated politics are involved. When you reflect back on that voter registration drive, he's been very, very outspoken about the George Floyd issue and registering to vote. And I don't want to get into politics, but I mean, that's just a fact. He's been very outspoken. I think he gave an interview Sunday to Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports about this very issue, and he talked to him at length about it. And, he's an athletic conference commissioner of one of the biggest conferences in this country. And rather than talk about the issue of conference athletics and the individual schools and their decisions, he's gone off track a little bit here, in my opinion, and talking about these things that have no relevance to whether they play college football or not this fall.
So we don't know his motivations, but he's opposed to playing even though his own son is playing. How do you think that plays for your average Big Ten supporter to see the commissioner shutting down a sport in the fall, all sports, by the way, not just college football, but certainly all sports, when his own son is going to be theoretically competing in college football this fall?
Well, if you've read any of these boards out there on all these hundreds of sites, it's not 99%. It's 100% negative reaction toward this guy. He must be tone deaf. And I keep seeing a little bit, I take that back. There's 1% of the people who say his son's an adult, he can do what he wants to do. But let's face it, if that's the case, and this man stands for principle and what is right and wrong, and he continues to cite player safety and COVID numbers, is the Big Ten and the Midwest and these states up here less safe than the state of Mississippi? It's Starkville, Mississippi right now, and on the practice field, engaging in contact with his teammates and then going forward and playing a football game. If he really believes that, would he expose his son to the dangers of it? I mean, it's like I said, it's hard to make this up. I mean, the inconsistencies are just huge, and fans notice this. You don't think Big Ten players are going to notice this kid practicing and playing? I mean, he's been there. He's still practicing, my knowledge, last 2 days. He's going to play. Big Ten players are just shaking their heads at this. It's unbelievable. They're asking the questions. I give Justin Fields credit for what he's done. I mean, don't fade into the background and let your future and your present be determined by a guy that worked for the Minnesota Vikings up to 5 months ago, never set foot in the Big Ten before. I mean, they did everything. That's what's sad. They did everything right. And I point to Ohio State because I know that program and what the players went through for the last 8 months to quarantine and to prepare and to do all the safe things they needed to do, just like at other schools. Several other schools of the Big Ten that take football seriously, unlike the two I mentioned earlier. They did everything right, and then they had it swiped away from them, and now they want to put them out into the general campus or send them back to their hometowns where they're more exposed than they were before. So it's just so hypocritical of what's going on right now.
We're talking to Jeff Snook, and I want to hit on some of this hypocrisy in addition to the commissioner's own son playing. This newest idea that has taken root, that it is somehow going to be safe to play in January, leaving aside that it's going to be a JV squad because the best players won't play. I just want you to explain, what in the world people could be thinking here. It's not safe to play in late September, September 26th or October 3rd or any time in November or December, outdoors college football. But suddenly it's going to be safe to play indoors college football in January? I mean, this is pure lunacy, right?
It is. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's number one, it's not going to happen. So anybody that they're towing the company line, telling you that's going to happen, they'll be the laughing stock if they follow through and begin football in January and turn around and do it again in the fall. I mean, have you ever stood on the sidelines of a college football game, Clay?
Yes.
You know what it's like, right?
I mean, the physicality of the game is entirely underrated for everybody who's never – I did a book about the University of Tennessee, and I got to watch a ton of the games from the sideline and see the hits, the speed, all of it up close and personal. And then I've gotten – fortunately to be a media member and be down on the field for a lot of big games over the years. So, yes, I'm fortunate to do that, but the average person has not.
Yeah, well, I thought so. It just TV never does it justice. And, I covered the NFL for brief periods in the 80s, and I always compared it to this. Just imagine 22 Volkswagens starting their engine and colliding every single play. Yeah. And you have 170 to 200 plays a game. Now in college football, you have more because of the
spread offenses and everything, yeah.
But in college football might be a degree lesser because of the size and speed. It is as intense and as violent, and the noise. And I wish the average fan who watches it on TV could be down there for one game because they would be shocked. But to do that, and I don't know if they're going to cut the schedule. They have no plans, first of all. But if they cut the schedule to 8 or 9 games instead of 10 or 11 in the spring, and then try to come back, what are you going to do, water down the fall season? So what you're doing is you're bastardizing 2 seasons into one instead of having to just can it until next August and start fresh with a full season. You're going to have all these kids opting out. Justin Fields is not going to play this spring. Neither is Sean Wade, their cornerback, and that goes for every Big Ten school that's got a kid that might be taken in the top 3 rounds. They'd be crazy to play January, February, or March, or whenever they're talking about, and then turn around and try to prepare for the combine or NFL draft that follows that. I mean, this is not going to happen, and if it does, it's terribly unfair to every underclassman. And they talk about player safety and player health, and then in the same breath they want to do this. It's just comical. It's really disgraceful, comical. You can add any adjective you want to add.
We're talking to Jeff Snook,